Modern cosmology, astrophysics, and aeronautics cannot be imagined without the space agency NASA. The history of space exploration is closely connected with the activities of this organization, the name of which is encrypted by the abbreviation of the four initial letters N, National, A, Aeronautics, S, Space, and A, Administration, herein after NASA. The name of this organization has become a real brand, with which the boldest, most ambitious successes and achievements of human civilization in the field of space exploration are associated. The NASA abbreviation was emblazoned on board the Apollo spacecraft that took man to the moon. These four letters are printed on board the most famous automatic interplanetary stations that today roam the vast expanses of the solar system. It is likely that the NASA logo will also be applied to the spacecraft on which the first expedition of Earthlings will go to Mars. And this brilliant story began 60 years ago, quite modestly and prosaically. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA for short, was created on October 1, 1958. This event was a forced political gesture made by the United States of America in response to the launch of the first artificial satellite in the Soviet Union, launched in the USSR on October 4, 1958. Until that time in the United States, the entire aviation and rocket program was handled by another agency, NACA, a special national committee created under the U.S. government in 1915. The governmental organization was in charge of all the work in this direction, but had neither the necessary powers nor the coordination of actions that is required when organizing and conducting large-scale scientific and technical research. Under the auspices of the committee, work was carried out to create the first supersonic airplane and ballistic missiles. In the field of rocket construction, the Americans, like the Soviets, tried to use captured trophy developments of rocket builders of the Third Reich. A serious space race was planned, which resulted in a grandiose confrontation between the US and the USSR in the field of rocket construction and space exploration. The history of NASA began in the post-war years. In the current political environment, it was necessary to have an organized production structure capable of responding quickly to the challenges of the time. By creating a new structure accountable to the United States government, the White House hoped to fundamentally change the current situation in aeronautics and space exploration. As a result, on October 1, 1958, the 34th President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, signed an executive order establishing the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the United States, a government agency whose activities would be devoted entirely to space exploration. With the birth of NASA, a full-scale battle for space began, in which, as time has shown, there was neither a loser nor a defeated side. As a result of healthy competition between the American Aerospace Agency and similar Soviet structures, man was able not only to go into outer space, but also to look into the most remote corners of the universe. To date, NASA is one of the largest government organizations, which is in charge of many scientific, technical, and production issues covering all areas of space exploration. NASA scientists have at their disposal the best research institutes and laboratories of the USA, the largest production and technical base, numerous scientific research, technical subsidiaries, and companies. The scientific and technical potential of NASA is enormous. The organization's funding system is no less impressive. Only in 2020, the size of government allocations in the structure of NASA amounted to an astronomical sum, a little more than $19 billion. The size of NASA's budget is larger than the size of some countries' government budgets. Today, NASA is not just an American aerospace agency. Today, it is a huge intercontinental corporation, which includes more than 300 enterprises, firms, and companies scattered around the world and under the jurisdiction of foreign governments. NASA specialists, employees of various industries and departments, form the basis of the staff, the number of which is 18,000 people. In addition to this, number of scientists and engineers from other countries work within the framework of NASA projects. We can say a lot that the creation of NASA was a political gesture, a response to the emerging superiority of the USSR in space exploration. However, the battle for space is only one answer. In fact, from the moment the agency was created, an arms race, unprecedented and grandiose in its scope, was launched. Despite the fact that America lost the beginning of the space race, later it was thanks to the activities of this organization that the United States was able to implement the most daring and grandiose projects. After the flight of the first American astronaut John Glenn, followed the large-scale work and research of NASA in the framework of the Apollo program, which resulted in the landing of American astronauts on the Moon. The epical event occurred in July 1969, when the lunar module separated from the Apollo 11 spacecraft and delivered astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin to the surface of our satellite. After this historic step, 6 more expeditions were sent to the Moon. A total of 12 American astronauts wearing spacesuits with the NASA logo on their chests visited the surface of our natural satellite between July 1967 and December 1972. The Apollo program, carried out under the auspices of NASA, was the most expensive scientific and technical project in the history of mankind. For the development of project documentation, creation and construction of the largest rocket, Saturn V, training of crews and directly on the flights themselves, $135 billion were spent from the country's budget. Implementation of the Apollo program allowed the U.S. to lead the space race. Later, under pressure from Congress, it was decided that the subsequent topics of NASA research and the work of the agency should be aimed only at the implementation of projects and space missions useful from an applied and scientific point of view. Excessive cost of the project prevented plans to create a lunar base, according to experts. From that moment, the period of space exploration began by creating and sending to distant planets automatic interplanetary stations and space probes. In the period from 1972 to 2020, NASA specialists, in close cooperation with foreign partners, created a whole fleet of spacecraft sent to explore and study the most remote corners of the solar system. Today, NASA works closely with other space agencies, including Roscosmos and the European Space Agency.
The U.S. Aeronautics and Space Exploration Agency has been involved in numerous projects throughout its history. Disregarding the astronaut flights to the Moon, NASA's other most significant accomplishments are 1958, launch of the first spacecraft, Pioneer 1, which went into Earth orbit to study the Earth's magnetic field. 1959, launch of the Pioneer 4 probe, which flew 60,000 kilometers from the Moon and became a natural satellite of the Sun. 1961, the beginning of manned flights. 1964, launch of the Mariner 4 automatic probe, which provided the first images of the surface of Mars. 1971, automatic interplanetary station Mariner 4 reached Mars and became its artificial satellite. 1971 to 72, consecutive launches of 2 probes, Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11, reached the vicinity of Jupiter and provided the first photographs of the distant giant planet. 1973, launch of the first orbital station Skylab into Earth's orbit, where the 3 American astronauts Edward Gibson, Gerald Carr, and William Pogue stayed for 84 days, thus setting a record for the longest human stay in space. 1975, the Viking 1 and Viking 2 space probes began their mission to explore the Red Planet. 1977, start of the Voyager 1 mission and the beginning of the legendary Voyager 2 mission, which set out to explore Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. 1981, launch of the Space Shuttle Reusable Flight Program. 1989, launch to Jupiter of the automatic station Galileo, created by NASA specialists in company with the European Space Agency. 1988 to 1990, creation and delivery of the Hubble Space Telescope into Earth orbit. recent successes, achievements, and plans of NASA. The information received from the Mars rovers and images of distant planets formed the basis of a unique general education project, NASA World Wind. This is a three-dimensional virtual interactive model of the globe of our planet, the Moon, Venus, and Mars, created in 2004 and available to the general public via the Internet. Not only scientists but also ordinary people can now study the surface of distant planets, explore the surface map of the Moon and Mars. As for NASA research aimed at studying other objects, it is worth mentioning the historic New Horizons Interplanetary Station mission, which was launched in 2006. The goal of the mission was to study Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the farthest planets in the solar system. Currently, NASA is actively cooperating with another American company, SpaceX. Created by American Elon Musk, SpaceX reusable rockets can fly into space several times, each time returning to Earth. NASA specialists are working to prevent meteorite danger. Thanks to satellites, observers launched into Earth's orbit, NASA scientists managed to detect in time the asteroid Florence, which in November 2020 flew in close proximity to our planet. In assessing the scope and scale of NASA's space programs carried out over 60 years, it is necessary to recognize the enormous contribution of that organization to the process of space exploration. Thanks to the missions of space probes and AMSs designed by the agency's specialists, humankind has received an enormous amount of scientific information in various fields of science. However, along with successes, NASA has also had some tremendous failures, the consequences of which at various times affected the volume of appropriations and the quality of research work. It will be appropriate to recall the unsuccessful mission, Apollo 13, which almost ended in the death of the ship and crew. The disasters of the United States shuttles Challenger and Columbia put an end to the reusable manned space shuttle program. Despite the fact that the place of Mars in the theme of NASA research in recent years clearly prevails, the agency is actively working on projects and programs of purely terrestrial applied nature. In close cooperation with specialists from Russia, European countries, China, and Japan, NASA specialists create unique spacecraft operating in the orbit of our planet.
Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel. See you soon. Bye.